Today, we're tackling a subject that has sparked intense debate, controversy, and a whole lot of confusion: genetically engineered foods. Specifically, we're going to delve into the eye-opening revelations presented in the book Genetic Roulette: The Documented Health Risks of Genetically Engineered Foods by Jeffrey M. Smith. Let's start with the basics. For years, the debate over GMOs has been stuck in a stalemate. On one side, anti-GM groups insisted that there was no systematic testing of GM crops, so we couldn't be sure of their safety. On the other side, proponents claimed that GM foods were safe because there was no evidence to suggest otherwise, and they argued that GM and non-GM crops were substantially equivalent. But here's the kicker. Genetic Roulette breaks this impasse wide open. For the first time, Smith meticulously lays out the adverse health problems associated with genetic engineering. And it's not just about the problems. He also presents the theory behind these issues, offering a glimpse into why these health risks might be occurring. Smith describes genetic engineering as a crude insertion process, akin to throwing darts into a haystack. This haphazard approach disrupts the delicate balance of genes that have evolved over millions of years to optimize the functioning of an organism. The result? Unpredictable mutations, genes being turned on or off, altered RNA or proteins, and even potential triggers for allergies or toxicities. Smith argues that the biotech industry has gone to great lengths to conceal the adverse effects of GM foods. Adverse reactions are rarely followed up, evidence of horizontal gene transfer is ignored, and data on animal mortality is swept under the rug. Why? Because the stakes are incredibly high. The GM seed industry is a multi-billion-dollar behemoth, and the potential risks to human health are enormous. According to Smith, the FDA's 1992 policy on GM foods was based on a lie. The agency claimed that there was no information showing that GM foods differed from other foods in any meaningful way. But internal documents, revealed through a lawsuit, tell a different story. FDA scientists were well aware that GM crops were meaningfully different and repeatedly warned their superiors about the potential risks. They urged the agency to require long-term safety studies, including human studies, to guard against possible allergies, toxins, new diseases, and nutritional problems. But those warnings were ignored. Instead, the FDA's policy was shaped by political appointees, including Michael Taylor, a former Monsanto attorney who later became the agency's vice president. With Taylor in charge, the scientists' concerns were dismissed and the voluntary consultation process was established, allowing biotech companies to determine the safety of their own products. The manipulation doesn't stop there. Smith exposes the cozy relationship between the GM industry and government regulators. He reveals how the industry has used its power and influence to shape policies, suppress research, and even silence critics. For example, when scientist Arpad Pusztai spoke out about the health risks of GM potatoes, he was fired from his job and threatened with a lawsuit. His research team was disbanded, and his findings were discredited. Now let's talk about the health risks. Smith presents a wealth of evidence, from peer-reviewed studies to eyewitness accounts, detailing the adverse effects of GM foods on animals and humans. Rats fed GM potatoes developed potentially precancerous cell growth, impaired immune systems, and damage to their organs. Mice fed GM tomatoes experienced bleeding stomachs and high mortality rates. But perhaps the most alarming aspect is the lack of rigorous safety testing. Smith argues that the studies conducted by biotech companies are often flawed, with small sample sizes, inadequate durations, and questionable methodologies. Moreover, the industry has a history of manipulating data and dismissing adverse findings. Smith also explores the potential long-term consequences of consuming GM foods. He raises concerns about the transfer of transgenes to gut bacteria, the impact on human DNA, and the possibility of triggering new diseases. He argues that the current regulatory framework is woefully inadequate to address these risks. So, what can we do? Smith offers several practical steps to avoid GM foods, from choosing organic products to using shopping guides and supporting legislation for mandatory labeling. He also calls for a more rigorous and transparent regulatory process, urging policymakers to prioritize public health over corporate interests. In conclusion, Genetic Roulette is a wake-up call. It challenges us to rethink our assumptions about GM foods and to demand more accountability from the biotech industry and government regulators. By educating ourselves and making informed choices, we can protect our health and the health of future generations. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of BrightLearn. I hope you found this discussion as enlightening and thought-provoking as I did. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to reach out. And don't forget to subscribe and share this episode with others who might be interested. Until next time, stay curious and stay informed.
Visit brightlearn.ai for more fascinating videos like this one, and naturalnews.com for full editorial coverage and breaking news on critical stories that keep you informed and aware of what's really going on.